Okay, so today guys we're working on task 9 in our remote learning booklets, and we're going to be creating a line drawing of some modern architecture. So the things you'll need are your task 9 worksheet. You'll need a ruler, sharpener, rubber and a pencil. If you haven't got task 9 remote learning booklet sheet for whatever reason, just a plain piece of A4 piece of paper will do. So the first thing you're going to do if you're working in the remote learning booklet is you need to grid up the source picture. So we're working from a secondary source today, so we need to add a grid to that, and we need to add the same dimensions of grid to the area to work in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the width of that panel. So with 0 on the left hand side, I can see that the panel is 9.5 centimeters in width. So I'm going to put a dash at 4.75 centimeters at the top, which is halfway. I'm then going to move my ruler down, making sure 0 is on the left hand side of the box, and I'm going to put another dash at 4.75 centimeters again. Just make a nice dash, and then I want you to just draw a vertical line joining those two dots up right down the middle of the image. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a grid with 4 different sections to it. So you're going to put a marker on this left hand side at 4.5 centimeters, then one at 9, then one at 13.5, and then obviously the bottom one is at 18. And then you're going to repeat that over the right hand side of the image. So 4.5, 9, 13.5. And then using horizontal lines, you're just going to draw that all the way across, so that you've now gridded up your source image with even measurements. Okay? So pause the video here and grid up your source picture. So now what we need to do is replicate that grid from there onto the area we're going to be working in. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get that first line in. I'm going to get you to put a grid line, a guideline in at 4.5, measure down the middle of from the left hand side, so 0 is on the black line, 4.5, and then you're going to join those up using a very light pencil line straight down the middle, vertical line all the way down. Okay, next thing you're going to do is repeat what we did before. So 0's on the top line, we're down the left hand side of the box, 4.5, 9, 13.5, and then obviously it's at 18 at the bottom. Move the ruler over to the right hand side, so again 4.5, 9, 13.5, and then we can join those up using horizontal lines, very lightly, very light lines. I'm pressing on a little bit harder than I would like you to, just so that I can make sure that you can see it on the video. So make sure that your guidelines are very, very light. Okay, we've now got our grid for if you're working in your remote learning booklet. You have now gridded up your source picture and your area for working on. Pause the video there and catch up. Okay, so if you are working on a piece of A4 paper and you're working from a source image because you haven't got your remote learning booklet, what you need to do is you need to draw a grid out that's going to be similar in size. So on an A4 piece of paper in a portrait orientation. If you are going to be working in your remote learning booklet, however, you can skip this next step straight to the next pause point to start to draw your outline. Okay, so we need to replicate that grid on our secondary source image onto a piece of A4 paper. Now the dimensions on the paper, because it doesn't fill the size of the A4, are going to be slightly different on how we're going to do it. We're going to make a larger piece. So this also works if you want to work on a larger scale than what is in your remote learning booklet. So the first thing you're going to do is put 0 at the top of your page on your ruler, and you're going to put a mark at 7 centimeters. You're going to put a mark at 14 centimeters. you're going to put a mark then at 21 centimeters and one at 28 centimeters. I want you to move your ruler then over towards the right hand side of the page, 0 at the top of the page again, light mark at 7 centimeters, 14 centimeters, 21 centimeters and 28 centimeters. And using a horizontal line, a very light horizontal line, again I'm going to press down harder, just join those marks up to create evenly spaced horizontal sections across your page of A4. Okay, so we've got our rows in, and there's 7 centimeter gaps, so from there to there is 7 centimeters. You don't need to write this, but just to show you that each gap is 7 centimeters. So we need to replicate that to create our square area to draw in. So what you're going to do is you're going to put a ruler. We know that the width of an A4 page is 21 centimeters. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a little bit on the off the left, a little bit off the right. So you're going to put a little dot at with 0 on the left hand side of the page, and you're going to put a dash at 3.5 centimeters. Move your ruler up towards the top, 0 at the left hand side of the page, little dash at 3.5 centimeters, and you're going to just join those up with a vertical line. So join the 2 dots up, top to bottom there, and I'm just going to draw a little arrow in there just to show you. So that's 3.5 centimeters. We're going to repeat those steps on the right hand side, so 0 on the right hand side of the page and a little dash at 3.5. Move it all the way down towards that lower line, and again little dash, 3.5, 0 on the right hand side of the page, and then you're just going to join those up with a vertical line there. And again I'm just going to draw in there just as a reminder, 3.5 centimeters. So the gap on the right here and the gap on the left we're not going to draw in. This gap in the middle will create a area to draw in that is going to be the same size as that on our secondary source image. But what we need to do is we need to get that middle line in. So to check whether I've done that right, I'm just going to measure from the left hand guideline to the right hand guideline, and it should be 14 centimeters. So in the right bang in the middle of there, I'm going to put a little dash at 7 centimeters. I'm going to move my ruler all the way down. I'm going to check 0 on the left hand guideline again. Right hand side guideline comes to 14 centimeters and a little dash at 7, and then I'm going to join that up with another line there. If you look at the source image, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 boxes, and they're square boxes the same as they are on our source image. So if you're working on A4 paper, pause the video here and follow out all those steps to get your grid on your A4 page. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to start our line drawing of the Burj Al Arab building in Dubai. So this is a hotel in Dubai, which has got this incredible style of modern architecture. We're going to use the grid method as we've done before, so if it helps you, you can just very lightly number up your grids to let you know which box you're working on at a time. So I'm just going to grid up my source picture there, and then I'm just going to very lightly, just in the top corner, I'm just going to write the boxes. This will allow me to know which box is which. So that might be a little tip to help you. And we're going to start with box 1. So I'm looking at box 1 on my source picture, I'm looking at box 1 on my piece of paper. So I can see that the building, we're only concentrating on the building. Don't worry about clouds or trees or things like that at this stage. All we're going to try and do is get the outline of the building first. So I'm going to work in box 1 and I'm going to start up here. And I can see that the start of the building crosses over the grid line, which is this grid line here, and it's quite close to my centre line. It's about there, I would say. It's probably about just under a quarter of the whole size of that box. So I'm just going to start lightly sketching up towards this point here. So this point here is where the sail, or the edge of the building rather, crosses over the center grid line, and that will tell me what kind of trajectory, what kind of angle this line needs to go. I can see that my first line isn't quite right. It's not really halfway, it's just a little bit less than halfway, and I'm going to just extend that up now, and we're now into box 2, and I'm just going to get that up to roughly around about quarter of the way. It looks pretty much in line, and then I'm just going to skip across a little bit to this area here, and I'm going to try to get that vertical line in coming down the right hand side here to get that kind of main support beam in. It's not perfectly straight. If you look at it, it kind of angles a little bit because of the way the photograph is. So I'm going to bring that all the way down, and it goes it comes all the way through all 4 columns, all 4 rows rather, passing through every grid line all the way down into box 8. I'm going to try and create that as straight as possible. Now, a couple of things. You can see that although I've used a sketch line, it's still quite smooth. It's not a broken line. I'm still just going over and trying to create it as smooth and as straight as I possibly can. Now, I will go, because this is just a guideline to begin with, this is just my outline. I can see that it's a bit wavy, so I will go in afterwards and just neaten that up. But for now, I'm just going to get these main bits of the line in. And I'm going to continue to use that method of looking at box to box where the areas cross each of the grid lines, and I'm just going to continue to do that to create the outline of the building. So I'm going to speed up the video here, which will show me completing the outline of the building. Okay, so you can see now that I've got the main outline in. You'll notice that my line is quite smooth, it's quite consistent, but it's also quite light as well. This will enable me to be able to rub anything out or correct anything. But you'll also notice that I haven't put any details in. There's no windows, there's no trees, there's nothing, there's no clouds, there's nothing like that. I've literally just concentrated on getting the outline in. So what I'd like you to do now is follow the steps that I've just given you and pause the video here and catch up to get all of your outline in. I'd really like to spend as much time as possible to create accurate shapes and proportion in the outline of your building, really working back into the areas to refine that until the shape is as perfect as it can be. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start trying to get some of the finer details in, like the lines of the windows. We need to make sure that the amount of windows and the gaps between the windows on the source image are the same on our drawing, because otherwise the perspective won't look correct. So I'm going to start by just putting guidelines in for where each of the windows starts and finishes on this main block here. So again, I'm going to speed the video up just to show you how it will work. Okay, so through that you'll notice that I was counting. I'd got my finger placed on the source image just to let me know that I'd got the right amount of windows in there, and now I'm going to repeat that step for the bit on the outer sail and do the same technique. I'm noticing that the windows down the section that we've just done are more or less horizontal lines, whereas the the lines on the sail, the windows on the sail, do curve a little bit. So you'll notice that the diagonal line, remember our lesson from perspective, so if these lines were all going off into a point over to the left hand side, the lines at the top would diagonally move down, the windows at the bottom would diagonally move up towards that point. So remember to include those steps and that element of concaved lines as we go. Okay, so you can now see how I've followed that viewpoint line, the diagonal line that would go off to our viewpoint, using those techniques we learnt for our 1 and 2 point perspective. I'm just going to clean up some of the areas of my sketchbook now where I've just kind of lent on there, and just make sure that I'm keeping it nice and tidy, nice and clean, getting rid of any of those pencil smudges. Okay, so pause the video here and fill in all of those guidelines for our windows. Okay, so now we're caught up with that, we're going to concentrate on getting the side windows in this panel here towards the right of the main block. We can see that those windows all come off into a viewpoint because they would be the side wall as we look at it. They're going to come off at a bit of an angle. Again, remembering our 1 and 2 point perspective, that these are going to come off to a viewpoint that's over here. So the ones at the bottom are going to be angled more upwards, the ones at the top are going to be angled more downwards. Okay, so make sure, again, using the same technique, so I'm keeping my finger on the source image, counting the windows as I go, and I'm just going to get the top one in and the angle of the top one correct first, and I'm just going to keep redrawing that until I'm happy with it, looking at the angle that I've used for the top. So there, and then I'm just going to bring that in to there, and I'm going to continue that all the way down. So now you've got all those side windows in, pause the video here and get all of that panel in now till we've got all of those kind of inner details. Okay, so we're starting to get quite a lot of the details in. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do this little viewing deck up at the top here in box 1 and 2. And I'm going to just start that by just looking at where it comes up, really trying to focus on where the lines are, and just using the same technique that I've just used to get the outline in. And I'm just going to keep on going backwards and forwards between my drawing and my source image. I'm just looking at where each of the lines cross over the grid line, and I'm just going to try my best to get the outline in and as many details as I can without adding any tone or overcomplicating the details. I'm just going for a real basic shape to begin with, and then I'm just going to join up that part of the wall there with the top section of those windows, as we can see. And then you can see that that part of the viewing deck just comes round. And then what I can do now is I can just rub out those areas of the sail behind it that I put in earlier, because we don't obviously need those now because that passes behind the viewing deck, and just get that viewing deck in now. So pause the video there and just get that little area in at the top. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get this little bit of sticking out viewing area here, which is part of the roof, I believe. And again, we can see that that drops below, just below this guideline, this grid line here. But it comes out, there's a little gap and it comes out of the side. It comes out quite far, but I'm just going to, it doesn't go right over the top of that guideline there, of my grid line. So I'm just going to draw that in. Again, it's off at a bit of an angle. I can use the numbers of windows to show me exactly the thickness. So the top line kind of goes with that line there, so I can see that that measures up there. And then the bottom of it, if I extended that down, would come probably to about the next window. So again, I can just see that it's not much thicker than that. And it's about using the things in the image that you can see, exactly like we did with the other drawings, to just measure where things are going to go and how big items are. That way then you get a good level of perspective and proportions. So I'm just going to get that rounded kind of weird shape in there. And again, just pause the video there and get your little extended viewing area in as well. So you'll notice at this stage that I haven't included any of those areas of like the trees or at the bottom or the sea or the clouds or anything like that. The reason why I've not done that is I want to focus on you guys getting the overall shape and proportions correct first. That's the main focus. Before we start to add any tone or anything like that, the main focus is to get our shape and proportion correct first. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start to rub out some of these grid lines that we put in earlier, just to kind of neaten up my page a little bit. Okay, so I've got rid of most of my grid lines now, and I'm just going to go back over just into some of the areas where I've taken out some of my drawing and replaced those. Okay, so now what I want you to do is pause the video there, rub out all of your grid lines, and then just go back in and just re-add any pencil lines that you may have disturbed. Okay, so now we've got a reasonably successful line drawing in of our building. What we're going to do is we're going to start to add some elements of tone. You'll notice that I haven't asked you to put in some of the lines, mainly these lines here on the main kind of sail type part of the building, which shows the ripples. The reason why I haven't done that is because I think actually they will be more effective with adding tone, by adding those using just tone rather than a line. So a couple of things we need to remember is we need to keep using our source image for which are our lighter or darker parts. Remember that we've only added a simple line drawing, and that obviously there are some lines in there that we haven't added, and we'll talk about that as we go. The first part I'm going to do is I'm going to start to add lighter tones at this stage, and I'm going to start to look at this first line that we got in using the main kind of structure area there. So again, I'm using the side of my pencil to begin with, not using the nib. You can see that I'm holding it in a slightly different way, and I'm just going to start to add some elements of tone, almost like a mid-tone, in and around that area there, and I'm going to bring that all the way down to the bottom. Okay, so pause the video here and try and get as much of that tone in there. You can see that I've just neatened up a couple of my original lines as well, just to make that highlight stand out a little bit more. Okay, the next area I'm going to work in is I'm going to work in the main kind of this area here, the main part of that kind of sail. And we can see that it's got these kind of curved edges where the building kind of just sticks out and the sun's hitting it and creating these kind of like triangular shadows all the way down. So the first thing I'm going to do is add very light guidelines to show me where those are going to be. So I'm just going to add a couple of lines as I come down. Again, what I'm doing is I'm going to use the window line, so I know that the next line here is going to be 1, 2, 3. It's going to be 3 from that line there, so I'm going to come down 1, 2, 3, and I know that my next line is going to be about here. I'm just going to put a little line in there, and I'm going to come down 1, 2, and then 1, 2, and then I'm on to the next one. So 1, 2, and again it's a curved line, don't forget, so it kind of curves up a little bit higher and then comes to our window, and then I'm going to go again 1, 2. It's again just another gap of 2, but it does curve down a little bit lower this time. So pause the video here and get your guidelines in for where you're going to add those triangular areas of tone. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add some tone to this area here, but what we're going to do is we're going to add it in a really subtle and informed way, again using the same technique. So you're going to start with your guidelines and you're just going to use the side of your pencil just really subtly into that top right hand corner. So you're going to come along the top underneath of your guideline and just add an almost triangular shape into the top right hand corner, just using the side of your pencil. Remember, we're getting our base layer of tone in. And again, I'm just going to speed the video up here to show me getting all of those areas in. So pause the video there and use the side of your pencil to get all of your base tones in. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in and just start to refine those elements of tone that I've just put in. And I'm going to use the nib of my pencil and I'm just going to start to add some darker elements at the top of each area of shadow. And I'm just going to gradually lift the pressure as I come down, just to create that kind of gradual blend back into the lighter tones and the lighter areas. And I'm going to just create some subtle dark tones in the underneath where that kind of bit of the building just curves away, and I'm going to repeat that all the way down using the very nib. Handy tip is I can notice that my pencil has just got a little bit blunt with that, so I'm just going to sharpen that up. That'll allow me to just get some of those finer areas in as well. And I'm going to just start to work into the darker areas in the top and just gradually lift the pressure, smoothing my pencil into the lighter tones. Okay, so what I would like you to do now is pause the video there and just get some of these darker and mid-tones in, just in that underneath area, all the way down that mid-sail point. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to just blend those darker tones out a little bit, so it's a little bit more subtle, and we get a little bit of tone in there as well. Now, this is the part where it can all go wrong. So there's a few things that you can use to do this. You can use some tissue. You could use some little earbuds or cotton buds, or if you've got, if you're dead serious about your drawing, you can actually get these little blending tools. They come in various range of sizes, and you can get these in most kind of like art shops or Amazon or places like that. I'm going to show you how this works, but also how cotton bud and tissue works as well. And all you're going to do is you're going to just, using a bit of pressure, you're going to just start to work out from your area of dark tone. I'm barely having to touch the page to just blend those tones out to make a smooth transition. And you can see how that is really effective using that tool. Barely touching the page, and I'm just lifting off as I get further away. Similar using a cotton bud, so you're going to start in the darker areas. Now with the cotton bud you have to apply a little bit more pressure, but again, as I start to move further away from the darker areas, I'm just going to lift the pressure a little bit more and just continue in those same gradual pencil effect that I want to create. And again, with a tissue, what you'll need to do is just fold it up into kind of a similar sort of shape as you would with the blending tool, and just try your best to not use your finger, but to just use your finger, not to touch the page with your finger, but to just use your finger to apply a little bit of pressure and blend out from there. I tend to say avoid using your finger because it's not quite as controlled as it would be using a cotton bud or a blending tool. Okay, so I'm going to speed the video up here and just show you how I can use the blending tool now to create a smooth, gradual transition of tone. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is pause the video there and get all of the, blend all of these areas just on that main part of the sail, creating some areas of mid and light tones and blending them together. Okay, so now I've in that area now in particular, we've got some lovely areas of mid-tone, we've got some lovely areas of light tone, and we've gradually blended those together really well. The one thing we haven't got now though is when you start to blend, you start to lose those darker tones that we put in the first place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the very nib of my pencil, and I'm just going to go back in and I'm just going to subtly neaten up those lines and just add those areas of extreme dark tones where they would be, where the building changes from one area to another. And I'm just going to add in there some subtle lines of darker tone and just neaten up those areas. So again, I'm just going to speed the video up here to just show me getting in those areas of detail back into the building. Okay, so pause the video there and get some of those areas using the nib of your pencil of darker tone and finer detail back into your drawing. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same technique we've just used on this main sail of adding the mid tones, blending those together using either a blending tool, a tissue or an earbud, and then working back into them using the pencil to create darker tones and those finer details. Couple of things, a couple of tips: make sure that when you're blending away from the outline. So for example, in this area here, I'm going to blend to the contours of the shape that I'm trying to create. I'm not going to be going left to right because the contours of the shape that I want to create are kind of curved. But I'm also making sure that I'm staying within the lines. I'm not blending over the lines. It'll smudge everything, make everything look a little bit misty and out of focus. So as you can see, I've just gone over that area now. I'm then going to go back in with my pencil down the right hand side of that line there, just to create that solid line again where the windows meet the wall. But I'm going to make sure that I'm blending that back in so that it doesn't look like a harsh cartoony outline to the windows. So again, I'm going to speed the video up now to show you how I use tone on the outer areas. Okay, last little tip before I'm going to let you get on with adding tone to some of these other areas is what you can do is, for example, in this top area here just under the viewing platform, it gets a little bit lighter. This is probably where the sun is bouncing off the white of the viewing platform back onto there. So I've gone quite dark in there. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch and just add a little bit of pressure with my rubber. I'm not kind of rubbing. You can see that I'm literally just dabbing the page and it just creates that little lighter tone. So I'm going to now speed up the video to show me adding tone to the rest of these outer parts, such as the structure pole down here, the top area here as well. So you can have that playing in the background, and I want you to start filling in the areas of tone around the top. Okay, so once you've got all of the tone in, including adding all of these windows in, you've added tone and to all of the areas and some of those finer details. Maybe you've added some of these areas of kind of supports at the top here and those little areas of detail. The last thing you're going to kind of come on to is the area just at the bottom. And what we're going to do is we're just going to add the areas of a window that we can see here, some of the texture and everything on the land mass at the bottom. So I'm just going to draw in again using the line drawing as we did before, just to create that outline. I'm going to finish off the bottom of the building like this, so it just comes across a little bit, bring that down, add the base, and then I'm just going to create the base of this landmass that comes round before heading back into the sea. So we're not going to worry too much about adding too many trees. If you wanted to do that, you could. However, I'm just going to add some little elements of windows and doors just at the bottom here, just to finish off the drawing. I'm just going to change the bottom like so. Okay, so once you've got the those little bits of line in the bottom, just to give you a bit of a guide as to where things are going to go, you can then just start to add more elements of tone into the windows, and then the last thing that you can do is just add some tone to the bottom. Again, using the side of my pencil, I'm just going to add a little bit of a shadow underneath the building. Okay, so now you've got a really nice line drawing. I want you to work in until you're happy that the shapes are really accurate, the details are really refined, and then obviously finish off your tone in all of those areas, making sure that it's a really strong focused piece on correcting shape, proportions, and then application of tone.